Chapter 15. Stylist Trouble. Nancy's announcement made both George and Bess stare at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" Bess asked. "We're going to the crystal party," Nancy replied. "The what?" Nancy laughed, then repeated Mr. Bellini's telephone conversation. "Ted Henri will be there, and it must have some significance. I think we'll be able to pick up a clue there." "Where is it?" George inquired. "I bought a newspaper on the way back from the fabric store, figuring there might be an announcement about it." Nancy turned to a page listing future social events and handed it to her friends. "The Crystal Party," Bess read aloud. "Highlight of the fashion year. Every major designer represented. Tickets $250. Advance reservations only." "Well, that lets me out," George mumbled. "Who can afford it anyway?" Nancy giggled. "Lots of people," she said. "Only the creme de la creme," Bess said, adding, "and Miss Nancy Drew, perhaps." Now, the young detective said. "I have a hunch we can go to the party without paying a penny." "Sure, if we sneak in," Bess said. "I could disguise myself as Lady Macaroni, and you could be Baroness von Hootenanny." "Even if we could wangle invitations, we'd have to wear the same things we wore to the benefit," George put in, "and I spilled salad dressing on my gown." "See, it's hopeless," Bess insisted. "On the contrary," Nancy smiled. "We are going to be the 3 most eligible young ladies there, and in the 3 most beautiful gowns. Come on!" The girls paid the bill and trailed outside, letting Nancy lead the way. Salt trucks had spread the melting grains on the street, and a similar layer covered the sidewalk, so Bess was able to keep pace as the trio walked up the street. "Where are we going?" she asked Nancy. "To Reese Associates, of course." "Oh boy, I hope Mr. Reese is in a better mood than the one we left him in," George commented. "I hope so too, because I'd like to persuade him to take us to the crystal party." To the girls' relief, the man's temper had subsided. He even seemed unusually happy, judging by his enthusiastic welcome. "I just received some very exciting news. Come into my office," he said, adding as they took seats. "Zoe Babbitt has decided to buy everything you modeled the other night, Nancy. Can you imagine? Everything!" "Congratulations!" The visitors chimed in together. "She said it didn't matter one bit that most of the designs might have been scooped by another dress house," the man went on. "There's nothing like a Reese original," she told me. So you were worrying unnecessarily, George said. "Well, I still don't know how my other clients will feel, but it's nice to know I haven't lost Mrs. Babbitt." Will she be at the crystal party?" Nancy inquired. "Most certainly, and wearing one of my winter creations, I suspect." "Speaking of winter creations," Nancy continued, "we came by today for a reason." The man perked up his ears. "Is it my turn to ask what you've discovered?" Nancy smiled. "Well, we've discovered some facts, but it's really too early to discuss them." She was worried that the temperamental designer might inadvertently slip something to the wrong people. But Reese's curiosity was aroused. "Well, what exactly did you find out?" he pressed the girl. "As I said, I can't tell you yet." "Can't tell me?" he bristled. "But I'm the man who—" "Mr. Reese," George interposed. "It's important to keep things confidential. For now." "Tomorrow night could produce the final chapter," Bess added. Seizing the chance, Nancy quickly expressed how crucial it was for the young detectives to attend the crystal party. "I can arrange that easily. On one condition, though," Mr. Reese bargained, "that you tell me everything." "I promise," Nancy smiled. "After the party." The man grumbled in annoyance, but finally agreed to obtain invitations. "And what are you planning to wear?" he inquired. "I suppose my old green skirt and blouse," Nancy said. George mentioned her dress with the oily stains on it, and Bess shrugged helplessly. "Well, you can't go to the crystal party looking like Cinderella's before the ball," Mr. Reese said. He strode to the doorway, addressing a secretary. "Find Rosalind for me." Nancy was surprised to hear that Rosalind had been rehired by Mr. Reese after he fired her and she went to work for Millington. Now the young detective was doubly happy she hadn't revealed her discoveries to Reese. Soon Rosalind appeared. She returned the girls' hellos with a silent nod, then glanced at the designer. "Yes, Mr. Reese?" "You remember Miss Drew?" the designer said to her. "Of course," she murmured. Nancy tried not to seem too obvious about her examination of the woman's face, which contained thin lines and shadows under the small eyes. The skin was paste white, giving her a sickly appearance. Mr. Reese instructed Rosalind to bring in several gowns. "One for each of the girls," he told her. Without inquiring about size, she looked at them from head to toe, then hurried out of the room. "She's a whiz," the designer commented. "I thought you fired her," Nancy couldn't resist saying. "I did, but she came back." "On her own volition?" Nancy asked. "Well, I didn't get down on my hands and knees, if that's what you're insinuating." Nancy ignored the comment as Rosalind reappeared with a variety of silks, taffetas, and velvets. "Those are fine," Mr. Reese said to the assistant. "Now help them make selections." "That one's gorgeous!" Bess exclaimed, eyeing a royal blue taffeta dress with a broad ruffle around the bodice. "May I try it on?" Rosalind was already leading the girls to a cubby of dressing rooms. "You can't leave here unless you do," she said. While Nancy and George settled on their choices, Bess was trying to zip up the narrow waist. "I was almost positive this would fit you," the stylist said to her. "I'm flattered, really flattered," Bess squeaked as the woman forced the zipper to close. "Only problem is I can't breathe." "I can fix that," Rosalind said, tapping her fingers on her chin. "You can?" Bess said hoarsely. "Right away?" Instantly, the woman pulled the zipper down, and the girl let out a heavy sigh. "How are you two both doing?" she called out cheerfully to her friends. "Fine," Nancy and George replied, but in fact they were having similar difficulties. All the clothes were much too tight, George's more so than anyone's. The narrow silk skirt she had chosen hugged her ankles, forcing her to take bird-like steps. "I'd never catch a thief in this thing," she laughed, poking her head into Nancy's cubicle. "Me neither," Nancy giggled. She gazed at her elegant ivory gown with a skirt that fell in a mass of folds. "Everything needs work," Rosalind admitted, looking at each girl in turn. One by one, she fitted them, sticking pins along seams. "Ouch!" Bess cried as a pin slipped through the zipper into her skin. "Be careful, Rosalind," Mr. Reese told her from the other room. "After all, these young ladies are my personal detectives." With that, the woman overturned a box of pins on the floor. She fumbled and nervously put them back. When she finished her work, she announced that the dresses would be delivered to the girls the next afternoon. "I will give your names to the chairperson so you won't have to buy tickets," Mr. Reese said. "I assume you know where the party is being held. I will meet you there, if that's all right." "Great," Nancy said gaily. "Thanks for everything." "I'm just sorry we can't invite Dave, Bert, and Ned," Bess said when they reached Aunt Eloise's apartment house. "Next time," Nancy remarked. Next time," Bess pouted. But as morning came and the sun shone over a glaze of snow that had fallen during the night, she regained her old enthusiasm. "I'm really going to pamper myself today," Bess declared, fluffing her curls. Considering it could be a long evening, Nancy said, I think that's a terrific idea. For all of us. Despite the fact the threesome chose to stay inside all day, the hours flew quickly. When Aunt Eloise arrived home from shopping, it was already late afternoon, and the altered dresses had not yet arrived. Maybe we should call Mr. Reese's office, Bess suggested. Nancy dialed the number, but a voice told her that the designer had left already. Is Rosalind there? The girl inquired. Just a minute, please. After a long pause, the voice returned. No, I'm sorry, she isn't here either. George spoke as Nancy hung up the receiver. Well, it's back to salad stains, she said. But a few minutes later, the buzzer from downstairs signaled the delivery. Thank goodness, Bess said, when she saw the gowns in plastic bags. The girls immediately removed them and disappeared into the bedroom to change. But as they pulled on the small metal tabs to open the long zippers, they discovered tiny stitches around the teeth. The dresses had been sewn up tight. End of chapter 15.